The contract was thick enough that it had its own gravity. I had been leaning over it for nearly an hour, marking sections with a pencil, moving slowly through language that had taken 3 months of negotiation to reach this point. $5 million, a deal that would expand the company into 2 new markets. Outside my office window, the late afternoon sun was flattening against the buildings across the street. Everything looked steady, predictable. Then the door opened without a knock. I glanced up, already prepared to tell someone to come back later. The words stayed in my throat. For a moment my mind recognized the face before the rest of me did. 6 years had changed him. My son looked thinner, older in a way that had nothing to do with time. His shoulders were tight, like he had been carrying something heavy for too long. Behind him stood a woman I had never seen before. He walked straight to the desk and slammed a document onto the contract I had been reviewing. "Dad, sign it." His voice wasn't angry. It was urgent. "I need 40% of the company," he said. "Right now. I owe people money. If I don't pay them, they'll kill me." The woman stayed near the door, watching me closely. My eyes moved from him to her and back again. He added quickly, "This is my wife." She gave a small nod, but didn't speak. I pulled the document closer. The paper was already folded open to the signature line. 40%. Not a loan. Not a partnership. A transfer of ownership. Whoever wrote it had done the legal work properly. The structure was simple but airtight. If I signed it, the company I had spent 30 years building would immediately lose nearly half its control. My son was breathing too fast. "You don't understand," he said. "I don't have time to argue about it." I kept reading. The room was quiet except for the rustle of paper. 6 years earlier he had walked out of this same office after telling me my company was too small, too slow, too careful. He had said he could build something bigger somewhere else. I remembered the way the door had slammed that day. Now he was back, standing in front of my desk like the years between had been a detour rather than a disappearance. "How much do you owe?" I asked. He hesitated. "Enough," he said. "That's not a number." The woman spoke for the first time. 3 million. Her voice was calm, controlled, not frightened the way my son's was. He shot her a look but didn't correct it. I folded my hands on the desk. "Who do you owe?" He shook his head immediately. "It doesn't matter. They're not people you negotiate with." His foot kept tapping against the floor. I watched him for a moment. Then I picked up the phone. The reaction was instant. "Dad, no," he said sharply. "You don't call lawyers right now. That's not how this works." I didn't answer. I waited while the call connected. Across the desk my son started pacing. "You're wasting time," he said. "You think contracts and meetings solve everything, but they don't. These guys—" I kept listening to the ringing tone. Eventually someone answered. I spoke quietly. A few short sentences, nothing complicated. When I hung up, the room returned to silence. My son stopped pacing. "What did you do?" "They'll be here in about 20 minutes. His expression tightened. "You don't understand," he said again. "If they find out I'm stalling—" "They already know you're stalling," the woman said softly. He turned toward her, confused. She didn't elaborate. I went back to reading the document. 20 minutes can stretch a long way when someone believes their life might end before it does. My son tried sitting, then standing again, then pacing in small circles near the window. The woman eventually pulled a chair away from the wall and sat down. She never stopped watching me. Finally, the elevator down the hallway opened. The footsteps were unhurried. 2 people entered my office. The first was Daniel Mercer, the corporate attorney who had represented the company for almost a decade. The second man was someone my son recognized immediately. I could see it in the way his shoulders stiffened. The man nodded at me before looking at my son. "You're the one with the payment problem," he said evenly. My son stared at him. "You know them." "I know who they work for." The room settled into a new shape. Daniel placed a folder on my desk while the other man pulled a chair out and sat down like this was an ordinary meeting. Which, in a way, it was. Details were exchanged quietly. $3 million. Gambling debts. Several very impatient lenders who preferred solutions that arrived quickly, but there are people in every city who understand how money moves. Who owes who? Who can speak to the right person without raising their voice? My call had reached one of them. No threats were made. No deals were signed that afternoon. Instead, the conversation turned practical. Structured repayment. Legal oversight. Clear documentation that would satisfy the people expecting their money back. It would take time. It would take discipline. But it meant my son would walk out of the building alive. 40 minutes later the meeting ended. Daniel and the other man left as calmly as they had arrived. The office felt quieter than before. My son sat in the chair now, staring at the document he had brought. "You didn't sign it," he said. "No." He looked up. "You could have just said no." I leaned back slightly.
Yes.
He frowned, trying to understand something that apparently hadn't occurred to him. Then why help at all? For a moment I studied the face that still carried traces of the boy I remembered. "Because you're my son," I said. The answer didn't sound triumphant or warm, just factual. He looked down again. "I left," he said quietly. I noticed. Another long silence passed. Eventually he stood. "I'll handle the repayment," he said. "I won't come back asking for anything else." I nodded once. He and the woman walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he turned slightly. "Thanks," he said. Then they were gone. The $5 million contract was still lying on the desk where he had dropped his demand. I picked it up again and returned to the section I had been reviewing before he walked in. Outside, the sun had almost set. The company was still mine, but the cost of keeping it that way, and still answering the phone when my son called, had just become part of the day's work.